Hello and welcome back to another one of our masterclasses. Today we have the fabulous Dr. Laura Markham with us. Welcome, Dr. Markham.
Thank you for having me.
I get so excited every time that you come on. The last time you were with us, I believe my husband actually hosted you, and we learned all sorts of things about sibling relationships. Okay, before we jump in, I'm going to do a quick introduction. Dr. Markham trained as a clinical psychologist at Columbia University, but she's also a mom. So she understands kids and parents. She uses her PhD to translate proven science and child development research into the practical solutions that you need for the family life you want. Dr. Markham is the author of 3 best-selling books that have been translated into 25 different languages. Wow. Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids, How to Stop Yelling and Start Connecting. The one that we're going to be talking about today, Peaceful Parent, Happy Siblings, How to Stop the Fighting and Raise Friends for Life. And then the next one, Peaceful Parents, Happy Kids Workbook, Using Mindfulness and Connection to Raise Resilient, Joyful Children and Rediscover Your Love of Parenting. Dr. Laura Markham's relationship-based parenting model, which she calls Peaceful Parenting, is rooted in research and parent-tested. Dr. Markham, your website, Peaceful Parents, Happy Kids, it's an absolute treasure trove. I refer my clients there all of the time because there's so many resources. It's absolutely magnificent.
I'm glad to hear that. You know, there's a whole sibling section, of course, because there aren't too many go-to people on siblings. But of course, I do lots more than siblings. So we start it in pregnancy and go through the teen years on the website.
Yeah. What I love, it's exactly that, is that there's a little section for each age group with, what do you call, do you call them guidebooks, parent handbooks?
It's there's a guide page that gives you links to all kinds of things. And then there's lots more that is that doesn't fit under an age, but applies to all ages or applies to parental self-regulation
Oh, I love it. So as mentioned, today we're going to be talking about siblings. I spent the past week rereading this wonderful book, Peaceful Parents, Happy Siblings. And if there was ever a manual for how to help your kids to be closer, to work through those challenging moments, this is definitely it. There's so much in here, lots of tools, lots of beautiful examples, which I think parents just read and go, she's talking right to me right now. Dr. Markham, we actually this week, we had one of our followers on social media send in a message. So we've been asking people, we've been telling them that we're having our masterclasses and to send in questions. And she sent this in and it was the perfect question for you. So if I could read it to you, there's lots in here. So I'll read it all and then maybe we can break it up a little bit.
Perfect.
Okay, great. All right. Dear Laura, I have 2 kids, an 8-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl. I have a close relationship with my own sister and I always thought my kids would grow up close, but they fight all of the time. Most of the time, I try not to get involved so that they can figure it out themselves, but it never ends. My 8-year-old, Dylan, is really aggressive with my 6-year-old, who is sweet. Dylan has always had tons of energy and needed lots of guidance with everything. Here is something that happened just yesterday, which is typical in our house. Emma, who's my 6-year-old, was making a tower with magnet tiles. Dylan wanted to make his own tower, so he started using the magnet tiles she was using, but there was not enough for him. As they scrambled over the last few magnet tiles, Dylan shoved his sister and yelled, "I hate you, I wish you were never born." Emma started crying loudly. I got so overwhelmed that I asked Dylan to just go to another room so I could help Emma. Dylan stormed off. Little Emma took forever to calm down, and by the time I got to Dylan, he was even madder. He refused to apologize. I told him if he couldn't be kind, he was going to bed. He called me stupid and our family stupid. He went to bed early, but I feel like a complete failure.
Of course, it's so hard. I mean, it's hard for every person in that situation, all 3 of them. And we'll go through each person as we talk. But I just want to acknowledge that when kids fight, it's very hard for the parents, right? And this mom, she says she was so upset. Well, because it's upsetting. It upsets us when our kids fight with each other. And we can totally understand how this mom got so upset by this and how hard it is to have kids who fight a lot. So there's the great news is, that's the bad news. It's hard. The good news is there's lots of things that she can do, even though her kids are fighting all the time. And I wish we'd heard from her 4 years ago. But, you know, when she had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old was the time to intervene here to begin with. That we could have intervened earlier, even than 4 and 2. But 4 and 2 would have been great. We would be on a completely different trajectory right now. But better now at 8 and 6 than at 10 and 8.
Oh, so true. So, so true. And I love just that compassion of, she sounds absolutely exhausted. She sounds so tired.
Yes, understandably. Understandably. So let's give her some tools to work with so
Let's do
that
it.
we can see what to do differently.
Okay, Dr. Markham, so I'm just going to read you kind of 2 sentences at a time, and then we'll go with that.
All right. I'm just going to hold up my hand to stop you if you go further than when I want to
That
comment.
sounds good. Okay, I have 2 kids, an 8-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl. I have a close relationship with my own sister, and I always thought my kids would grow up close, but they fight all of the time.
Yes. So the fighting all of the time part, I would say, as I just said, there are things you can do. But one of the things that I see parents do that causes more fights and causes more sibling rivalry is intervening in fights in a way that is not productive. So, and I saw her do it in this fight. So we'll talk when we get further down about why that causes more fights, that way of intervening, and how you could intervene differently. So there are ways, even when they fight all the time, there are ways to not have them be fighting all the time and to prevent those fights. And so one way is, what do you do in the moment when you intervene? There's ways to intervene that work better than others. And there's another thing to remember, and that is kids who fight all the time are showing you something deeper that's going on. There's something happening there that is not, that could be addressed not just in that fight, but in a deeper way. So and we're going to talk about some of those things because we see we've got a characterization of Dylan in a certain way, high energy, needing lots of guidance. We'll talk about that. So sometimes kids are prone to dysregulation, and those kids, they end up, if they're in that dyadic sibling relationship, we know research shows us that those dyadic relationships have more conflict because those kids get dysregulated more often and therefore, they're going to have more conflict with everybody, their peers, their siblings, their parents, because it's just harder for them to re-regulate. So that's something we'll talk about. But there's another reason kids fight all the time, and it has to do with, well, what the research shows, it has to do with the parent's relationship with each child.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. And so an example would be if we think our 6-year-old is sweet and we think our 8-year-old needs guidance with everything and is sort of, there's an implication there that it's a lot for the parent, which makes sense. That way of feeling about our kids will make itself known to them. They will sense that. Whatever we feel radiates from us in the words, the tone, the actions. And so that can cause sibling fighting. The parent's relationship with each child is one of the primary indicators of sibling rivalry. When a parent has a great relationship with each child independently, less sibling rivalry. So that's something to keep in mind when we hear they fight all the time. That's something to check, right? And so I'd wonder about that. And then the other thing that I see is that parents have a child and they have a new baby. They have a child and they have a new baby. And the child who's there has a hard time adjusting. Every child has a hard time adjusting to the new baby. And if the parents can give them enough support, they can make that adjustment. But some kids need more support than others. The high needs kids, we know from the research, they need much more support to make the adjustment. If the parent doesn't know how to help the child make the adjustment, it doesn't just go away, that sibling rivalry. The kid might try to act right. And if they're feeling good and connected to you and regulated that day, they can act right. And, their affection for the little sibling might grow on them. So sometimes they act right just because they like the little sibling some and they want to play with them. But if the parents have never understood how to help the child with their fear and jealousy when the baby was born, then you're going to find kids fighting all the time. So that was a lot I just threw in there, but it's sort of the frame we need to look at. If kids are fighting all the time, we want to ask, has this been going on a long time? And did this child get the help they needed? Is this a high needs child who needs extra something from the parent? Is there room for the parent to improve their relationship with that child? Another thing that the research shows, and then I'll stop with the frame, is that when we discipline in a way that involves control, children use that. They learn from that. They end up with, that's how you relate to other people and you want them to do what you want. So they use that control framework to relate to each other, and it causes more conflict between the kids. If the parent uses a more, what I would call a peaceful parenting approach, where they self-regulate and it's all about the relationship and the connection with the child and creating safety so the child can regulate and feel connected, and then they coach the child to help them with their emotions. Those parents they're modeling something for the child about human relationships. And those children end up relating to their siblings with that kind of way of relating. So it's a much more positive sibling relationship.
Which makes so much sense because we're learning from our parents. So it's okay, when we have a problem, what do we do? So instead of control, when we kind of come towards them with a more peaceful, warm approach, that's how they then learn to handle other conflict in their world.
Exactly. Kids who get yelled at all the time yell at their siblings, right? We know they're learning what they live. Okay, so I'll stop and let you go on with the letter, but that gives us a frame to consider the fact that these kids are fighting all the time. So things we want to explore.
Love it. Okay. Most of the time, I try not to get involved so they can figure it out themselves. But
I'm going to stop you right there because there's research on that as well. The whole idea that we don't get involved and we let them figure it out themselves is very seductive to parents. Wouldn't it be? Because this is a very stressful thing. We don't really know how to intervene. So if we're told to let them work it out, we can say, oh, well, that way they'll learn to work it out. That's great. I'm just going to let them learn to work it out. But the research shows that's not what happens. So back in the day when the parents would jump in and say, you know better. You're treating your sister badly. You're the big brother. You should know better. We learned that doesn't work. What ends up happening? Well, we can imagine what ends up happening. When I do a talk on siblings, I'll invite two people up on the stage and I'll say, okay, fight with each other. And then I come in and I do that parenting approach where I scold one of the kids. And then I say, okay, what did you feel? What are you thinking right now? To both kids. And the kid who I scolded says, oh, you just wait till I get my sister alone or my brother alone. I am so mad at them. My parent always favors them. Nobody ever listens to me. Nobody understands me, right? So we know that making that child wrong does not help them feel warmer toward their sibling or more inclined to work things out with their sibling. Also,
which makes so much sense.
Of course. And also the other kid feels like, I won. Mom likes me more. Dad likes me more. And not only that, I like it that they like me more and I need to keep them on my side. So I'm going to undermine my sibling. I'm going to make sure they know how bad my sibling is and make my sibling look bad, right? Not a way we want to intervene. So we know that doesn't work, right? So parents thought, okay, well, we won't intervene. We'll let them work it out themselves. And so there's some researchers that did put video cameras in to the home and watched what happens. What happens when the parent bows out of the discussion and before the kids have learned the skills is that it promotes bullying. Basically, the children assume if you're there in the kitchen or you're there behind the, whatever you're reading, or you're, even if you're on the phone, they assume that you're somehow listening if you're there and that you're condoning whatever's happening. So what happens is they don't work it out. The more powerful child wins. Usually that's the older child or the more physically aggressive child. Sometimes it's the younger child who basically has experimented and learned that they just can erupt into upset and tears and get the parent to come running in on their side and back them up. So the other child's like, all right, I'll do what you want. But what ends up happening is not that children are learning the skills to work things out. What ends up happening is that power dynamics determine who wins, whatever that conflict is about what they're going to play or what toy who gets to play with or whatever. So kids don't even cite family rules in this kind of an instance. It's just whoever is more powerful wins. So there is another approach. It turns out that when the parent does intervene, but doesn't take sides, the parent intervenes by reinforcing the family rules. Our family rule is no hitting. Our family rule is be kind. Our family rule is no name calling. So the parent does reinforce the family rules, but the parent isn't making somebody wrong. They're saying, you two are having such a hard time. You two are having such a hard time. And then they lend their, in the old days, they called it ego strength. And now I would call it their calm nervous system. They lend their calm nervous system to the kids and they co-regulate with the kids to help the kids calm down. And then they help the kids talk to each other. Now, this takes a lot of time. You're busy. You've got 10 million things to do. You're not going to want to do this. What I have seen is it takes about a month of this to get kids to be able to use it. A 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, it might take longer than a month. They've been doing this a long time. but they'll need you less and less. You can listen and see if they're starting to work it out. And if not, you make a beeline for what's for there. And we'll talk about specific things to say, like in this instance. But what the researchers have found is that when you listen and the kids know what to do, it's that you've been doing this for a month, you'll hear things like, I was using that. Would you give it back, please? Oh, but when will it be my turn? Oh, I'll be done after lunch. You can have it then. Oh, I hate waiting. That's okay. You want to use the dump truck while you're waiting? They will actually help each other. And even if one of them says, oh, you're a meanie. Our family rule is no name calling. I don't like it when you call me a meanie. I'm allowed to use the snowplow too. You can use the dump truck. No, I want the snowplow. Then they know they have backup. Dad, Mom, can somebody help us, please? Right? Really different than clobbering the kid with the snowplow, right? So when we teach and reinforce family rules and they know we're available as backup, they begin to use these skills. And I've had so many parents say to me over the years, I wouldn't have believed it was possible. I would never have thought my kids would be the ones saying, could I have that back, please?
Yeah. And instinctively, it makes more sense because I think for so long we've been told, oh, the kids, let them figure it out themselves. If you get involved every time, they're going to need you every time. But how do they improve their skills if there's nobody actually showing them how to use those skills? Where do they come from?
Yes, exactly. Exactly right. And I want to add that in a tribal culture where there are multi-age kids playing together, the parents don't have to be involved with every single thing because the older kids have already learned this skill and they teach the younger ones and they serve as the, mediators helping the kids navigate a conflict. So my assumption is that, it takes a village, right? When we lived in villages and kids palled around with the older kids, they learned that way. But that's not how our kids grow up. They're not in multi-age classrooms. They're not in multi-age, church groups. They're not in multi-age anything unless you have a unique neighborhood where they're actually palling around with the older kids and learning it. But even then, you don't know what those older kids learned because the culture being what it is, you don't know if anyone taught the older kids these kinds of skills or if they see it as their job the way that kids in a tribal culture would.
So interesting. So interesting. Yeah. And I find kids, now that there's more same age group, they tend to behave better with friends than they do with their siblings because the friends don't have to be their friend.
Exactly. Threat of exit. And that's the famous finding that Poe Bronson publicized, is that the threat of exit, people always say, oh, only children won't be able to have good friendships because they don't have siblings to practice on. Actually, it turns out to be completely false. Kids practicing on siblings, there's a power dynamic that is not there with friends because friends have a threat of exit.
So interesting. So interesting. Yeah. Should I go on to our next line?
Yes.
Okay. My 8-year-old Dylan is really aggressive with my 6-year-old who is sweet.
Okay, so let's stop right there. We have a sweet 6-year-old, and I feel terrible for the 6-year-old who gets aggressed upon, right, as we read this. And I'm sure mom feels terrible for her sweet 6-year-old. And I often find that the younger child tries desperately to please the older child and wants to be friends with them. But the older child has a chip on their shoulder toward the younger child because their feelings when the little one was born, those feelings never got, no one did any emotion coaching with them. No one helped them through the feelings, and they've had a chip on their shoulder ever since. You can only have that situation for so long before the younger one stops being so sweet. At some point, they're just really hurt to their core, and they're just angry. And they also, I have spoken to so many adults who will have told me that their older sibling was cruel to them, and they never got past it. It's like being bullied in your own home by someone you look up to. It's just devastating. So this sweet 6-year-old is being treated in a way that is not okay for the 6-year-old, clearly. And so I don't want any understanding that I'm offering of the 8-year-old to be misconstrued here. We need to interrupt the situation and protect that 6-year-old. She's already endured this for 6 years too long, as far as I'm concerned. So there's that. That's an important thing. Another thing, we want to go back to what I said in the beginning about the relationship with each child. The way mom has described the 6-year-old as sweet and the 8-year-old, who you didn't read that part yet, but having tons of energy and needing lots of guidance with everything, tells me the needing lots of guidance. I hear high needs kids. And as I said, there's research about that. But regardless of whether he would be called a high needs kid by someone else, mom is already telling us her perception of him, which is that he needs lots from her and he's exhausting. So, again, I would suggest this mom, first I would acknowledge it is hard to have a high needs kid. I just want to acknowledge that. And then I would suggest that this mom really look at her relationship with her son and do whatever she needs to do to heal it. I think there's all kinds of exercises she could do, lighting a candle and writing a letter to him, not that she's ever going to give him, but a letter to him about the things that have been hard for her and how the things she's sorry about and how much she would love to give to him and how she loves him so much. The getting in touch with the love she felt for him when he was first put in her arms, right, is important here, because otherwise it's too easy to see him as the difficult one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I can feel mom's protection for the little one.
Yes.
And then just with Dylan needing to, as you say, create a new connection with him, or a deeper connection at this point.
I want to also address the tons of energy comment. So tons of energy could mean lots of different kinds of kid. I had 2 kids with tons of energy, but neither of my kids ever received an ADHD diagnosis, and I don't think they would have qualified for it. We don't know anything about Dylan, whether he would qualify, but tons of energy sometimes goes along with lack of impulse control and a harder time learning social skills and more frequency of dysregulation. So all of those things make the sibling relationship harder. So I don't know if that's the case with Dylan, but tons of energy might be telling us this is a kid who gets dysregulated very easily and doesn't exercise impulse control. I mean, we saw what happened next in this encounter where he shoves his sister, right? So we don't know if that's a regular occurrence, whether fighting all the time. It could be that fighting all the time means he shoves her once a day, twice a day. Could mean fighting all the time means they yell at each other, but he shoves her once a month or once a year. We don't know that. But if he's shoving her a lot or even routinely, we could see how the parent could just feel exasperated and angry. So again, back to her trying as hard as she can to look at it through his eyes. And we'll do that in a minute further on in this letter. But to look at it through his eyes, because if she doesn't, she can't connect with him. And if he doesn't feel connected, he can't regulate.
Dr. Markham, the other thing that you talk about in your book, and I wonder your thoughts on it here, we also don't know anything about mom, but that often stuff from our own childhood triggers us with our own children in their sibling fights. And so I wonder if there might be a little bit of that going on here too.
Yes. I've seen it usually when someone's had a bad sibling relationship, right? That the mom, her brother beat up on her. So when she sees Dylan shove Emma, all of that comes out and she is, outraged. And that's really a hard thing for a parent to handle. But I've also seen the other one more like she describes, where I had a great relationship with my sibling. What is wrong with my children? Right? So I have seen it that way as well. And it also, again, we don't know anything for the mom, but I would just say the point you're making is such a good one, to just look at any way in which she's triggered here. Triggering is something from your past that's not really about what's going on in the present moment. It's coming from your past and triggering, pressing the button so that something happens in the present moment that's really about the past. Your feelings are really about the past. So you're right. That could be happening too.
Are we ready for our next line? So you already mentioned the next one. Dylan has always had tons of energy and needs lots of guidance with everything. Here is something that happened just yesterday, which is typical in our house. Emma, my 6-year-old, was making a tower with magnet tiles. Dylan wanted to make his own tile, so he started using the magnet tile she was using, but there was not enough for him. As they scrambled...
Stop.
Yes.
All right. So first of all, these are 2 children who fight all the time. So we don't know where the mom must know this information, because she must have been near enough to know the information about Emma started using the tiles, then she was making a tower, then Dylan wanted to use the tiles, and there were not enough for him. So either she heard it from her kids after the fact or she monitored it during. We don't know what happened. But I would just say that if you have kids who are shoving each other, you need to stay close. you can't just hope they're not going to shove each other. You can assume they will shove each other. You can assume if you have a kid who routinely gets dysregulated when he's relating to a sibling or playing in the same room with a sibling and has a hard time regulating and sharing the toys, regulating himself in response to the other child using the toys, you can assume there will be shoving or at least yelling or something. So you need to stay close by. And again, had this conversation so many times with parents, and they're like, I can't stay close by. Like, I've got stuff I've got to get done. I totally understand. And if you can't be monitoring this, at least with your, hearing, right? You can't be listening to your music or the radio or something. You actually have to be monitoring what's going on. So I'm hoping that mom is doing something, folding laundry, making dinner, something, and she's listening, and she hears Emma say, I'm making a tower with the magnet tiles. And Dylan says, I'm going to make something too. Wait a minute, you have all the tiles. I need more tiles. The minute you hear that, you make a beeline. If you have a kid who's been shoving, now if you've been working for a month on this, you can pause. You can stay out of sight around the corner, but ready to move in, but listening for the next thing. But that hasn't happened here yet. She's at least a month away from that, a month of teaching and listening and coaching. So she needs to be there aware that something's going to happen. I would also say just the idea that there were not enough for him tells me something. It suggests to me that Dylan, he experienced that there weren't enough magnet tiles for him. Maybe Dylan also has the other experiences where something's not enough and it's all his sister's fault. Like, I don't get to go to the playground enough because my sister's napping because she's younger and now she's 6. But that could easily be a part of his life until recently. Or I don't get enough of my parents' attention. I want my mom to spend more time with me at bedtime, but she only spends a little time with me and then she's got to go deal with the 6-year-old, right? And in fact, I want more of the attention at the dinner table. I want to tell my dad what happened in my day. And my sister wants to tell him too. There's not enough for me, right? There's not enough magnet tiles. Maybe there's not enough other things, right? So we've got a little red flag here. And I would also say one other thing about specifically the magnet tiles. If it's something that they play with they may have not touched the magnet tiles in 3 months, but if it's something they play with every day and there's constant fights about the magnet tiles, you need to get more magnet tiles. That's one thing. And each of them can have their own separate sets, And another thing, how do you handle sharing and turns? So my recommendation is that you let each kid use the toy for as long as they want, a self-directed turn, but you have some cutoff because they can't use it for the rest of their life or even necessarily all day, right? But maybe they can use it until the next meal. So you would say, in this case, he would be like, I'm going to use magnet tiles too. If I were the mom and that happened, I would come around the corner and I would say, you both want to use magnet tiles. And she's like, yeah, I'm building a tower. And he's like, I'm going to build one too. And I would say, I wonder if there are enough magnet tiles to do that. At that point, you're heading it off at the pass, right? Because in fact, it's not the first time I've heard there aren't enough magnet tiles for kids to use them. So if you don't have enough magnet tiles, you want to just put that right out, right there. I wonder if there are enough magnet tiles for both of you to use them at once. And Emma probably will say, well, I was using them first. You can say, well, you were using them first. And it looks like Dylan wants to use them too, right, Dylan? Yeah, I want to use them too. How many are you each going to need? Is it possible for you both to use the magnet tiles at once? If not, if they're like, well, actually, you have to give me some that you're using, Emma, because I'm going to need them. You can say, Emma, your brother says that he'd like some of the ones you have because he would like to build a tower too. Is that going to work for you? No, I need all of these. You're really not willing to give him some of them right now. You're planning on using them all for your project. Is that right? Yes, I was using them first. He can use them after. So Dylan, did you hear what your sister said? Yes, she always, you can see it's not going to be a pleasant interaction for that parent, right? But what you're doing is heading it off at the pass where both people get their needs out on the table. And you say, well, our family rule is that the person who has the toy first can use it until they're ready to give it up or the latest, the next meal. So our next meal is lunch. So Emma, when will you be ready to give the magnet tiles to your brother? Because he really wants to build something. And the other thing you do, he's 8, so you really don't have to ask the question for him. You would do that if he were 4. You can actually say, do you want to ask your sister when she'll be ready to let you use the magnet tiles? And he'll be, when are you going to let me use the magnet tiles? And she'll say, I want a long turn. And you say, I hear you want a long turn, Emma, and you can have a long turn. Our family rule is until the next meal. So lunch is in about an hour. Are you going to need them for the next hour? Well, that she might give him before the hour because she's enjoying this feeling of power. She wants that feeling of generosity when she hands them over. She's sweet. We know she's sweet. She's somebody who wants connection is what I interpret sweet. She wants connection with her brother. She might say, well, I'll give you some right now, or I'll give them to you in half an hour. She might do that. Or she might say, yeah, I need them until lunch. And you say, okay, Emma's pretty clear. She needs them until lunch. Dylan, you're going to be able to use the magnet tiles after lunch. What are you going to build? I don't want to wait. He could easily have a total meltdown at this point. In fact, in the beginning, after a month, he won't. But in the beginning, he's likely to have a total meltdown, right? But what happens when we do this, when we use self-regulated turns, self-directed turns, is that the kids learn that their time with the toy will also be protected. So tomorrow, Dylan gets up and he makes a beeline for those magnet tiles. And Emma's going to be like, but I want to make a tower again. And you go through exactly the same thing, but he's the one with the tiles and she has to wait till after lunch. So you can count on the kids actually seeing the fairness of this, but not the very first time you do it. You have to talk about the rule in advance or he'll think you're being totally unfair to let her get her way, right? When at his expense. But if you've established that this is your new rule, then it's okay. And then what I would say is you help him wait. It's hard to wait for your turn. You help him wait. And look at all the great things he's learning from that. My mom or dad cares how I feel enough to be with me. And I don't get the magnet tiles when I want them, but I get something even better. I get my parent who care and are helping me and supporting me. And that's what I really wanted anyway, right? And also delayed gratification. I have the capacity to wait, right? And actually, when the waiting is done, whether it's after lunch or before lunch after half an hour, if Emma's like, or if she starts to walk away from the magnet tiles and you've taught him to say, Emma, are you done with the magnet tiles? Because I'm going to take my turn now if you're done. Would you give them to me? What ends up happening is when Emma gives him, hands him magnet tiles, that moment in both people, something happens to the nervous system, in the physiology. What happens for him is he feels her benevolence, her generosity. She's like, she's giving me something. I like her. I like her. She's giving me something. And as that warm feeling comes from him, she's getting the feeling, I like it because we're programmed this way. Humans are programmed to have these interactions and find that delicious meeting point where the generosity is given and the person receives and we unite around that. And so she's getting that feeling of, oh, look at the look on his face. I made him happy. I love that warm feeling I'm getting.
It's beautiful and such a different feeling from you have to share. Hand it over, you have to share. Yes. So it's like it's this forced interaction where what you just described, it's just I feel calm listening to that. It's beautiful.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So then the next line I think is really important. Go ahead.
Yes. Where did we end? Oh, there. Okay, so I'll start here. Dylan wanted to make his own tower, so he started using the magnet tile she was using, but there was not enough for him. As they scrambled over the last few magnet tiles, Dylan shoved his sister and yelled, I hate you. I wish you were never born.
Yes. So first of all, they're scrambling over the last few magnet tiles. She must have known they were scrambling to say it that way, right? It isn't because if she just heard from her children after the fact that Dylan wanted them and there weren't enough for him, so he shoved her and shouted at her. That's how she would have heard it from her daughter and from her son, some version of that. But she knows they scrambled over the last few magnet tiles, and that's when it happened. Right there, we had a ticking time bomb that we had so many opportunities to intervene. But this poor mom had been basically led to believe that she shouldn't intervene. She should let them figure it out. So her children are learning from this experience, but the lessons they're learning are not the ones she'd want them to learn. They're learning no one will help us. No one's there for us to help us when we have this kind of a problem. We're you can imagine the scramble, right? She could have intervened before the scrambling and shoving and shouting, right? If she had just come into the room and said, You two are having such a hard time. I'm here now. Let's all take a breath. All of this could have been circumvented, right? But instead, he shoves his sister and he yells, I hate you. I wish you were never born. And now we need to look at it from his perspective, why he would do such a thing, right? Because obviously it's not an okay thing to say to your sister, I hate you. I wish you were never born. And it's not okay to put your hands on her, to shove her, right? Neither thing is okay. He purposely said a cruel thing to her that was a very rejecting, mean thing to say, and he shoved her. So, first of all, humans don't say things like that to people in their family or to anyone unless they're dysregulated. So we know he's already dysregulated. And if we sort of keep looking back along, if we take our videotape here and we press rewind a few times and go back, he got dysregulated at some point along the way. She started building her tower, and then he wanted to do it too. And right then, often, he might not have looked at those magnet tiles in 2 months. The minute she starts using them, all of a sudden they look really enticing to him. That alone would be a little signal to us, little red flag that there's something going on. She has something, so he wants it. There's not enough. Then there's not enough for him. That's enough to dysregulate him right there. So I'm going to suggest that probably, my hypothesis at this point is this is a kid who really feels like his sister gets everything. He doesn't get it. She's the sweet one. He's the challenging one. There's never enough for him. Maybe even that he's too much for his parents, right? And that until she came along, things were pretty good, but things have been pretty bad since she came along. It's all her fault. We can absolutely see how any one of us in his shoes might feel that way, right? If I were an 8-year-old whose sister came along 6 years ago, who is sweet, and as my son said to me once, you think she's perfect just because she's so cute, about his little sister, right? Like this sweet 6-year-old, we can just see. And if I were that 8-year-old who nobody seemed to care what I wanted, what I thought, what I needed, right? You can just see the heartbreak here for this little boy. And and at the very end, when there aren't enough magnet tiles, because no one has foreseen this, they don't have a lot of prefrontal cortex, these two kids. They're young. But somebody had the prefrontal cortex to know there weren't enough magnet tiles. You and I figured it out long time ago. So clearly somebody knew, but the kids didn't know. Suddenly they look in the box or on the floor at the magnet tiles, and they're like, oh my God, there's not enough tiles. Scramble, right? And at this point, what happens when we have to scramble for a scarce resource? Our protector selves come out. That's what the internal family systems people would say, right? Or our watchdogs come out, which the polyvagal people would say, right? The part of us that needs to protect and fight, we go into fight mode. And suddenly our little sister looks like the enemy. Now, our sweet little sister might think we look like the enemy too, but we know that he's the one who was the aggressor here. She probably doesn't feel like she can aggress against him because she's younger and smaller. And maybe that isn't in her nature anyway to do yet, right? Maybe she hasn't shoved quite enough times by him to make her shove back. Or maybe she just knows if she shoves, she'll get hurt. So she doesn't. But they scrambled, which leads me to believe she did fight for what she wanted. And he fought back. And both of them were pushed into this nervous system state of fight, right? They're both seeing each other as the enemy all of a sudden because they're in fight mode, right? So at that moment, he yells the worst thing he can think of at her to vanquish her. I hate you. I wish you were never born. He negates her very existence because he's trying to make it clear just how upset he is. Does he really wish she was never born? Well, probably sometimes, but not all the time. Does he really hate her? Well, probably not all the time. I'm sure there are times when he thinks she's pretty great and enjoys playing with her. But at this moment, he doesn't know how else to express this. And he goes for the heart and he aims it, and she's hurt and she begins to cry. She also got shoved. We don't know how much her body was hurt, but she's crying loudly. She's showing just how upset she is. I'm going to assume she's actually that upset. It might be that she's learned that only by crying loudly does a parent intervene. We don't know that. But it's entirely possible that she's crying loudly because she's physically hurt and emotionally hurt.
Yeah. And I think, Dr. Markham, it's so powerful to look at this from Dylan's perspective as well. Because I think so often we go, what? He pushed her? There's this automatic response.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we want to protect the sweet little 6-year-old. Like, how could he have done such a thing? He's bad and wrong. But every human being, certainly every parent, has done things that we regret. And I guarantee you that Dylan regretted this very quickly after doing it. I guarantee you. He was dysregulated. Every parent who has done something they regret, they didn't do it when they were warm and fuzzy. They didn't do it when they thought their children were little angels. They did it when they felt overwhelmed, victimized by life, maybe even victimized by their child. Like, I'm so overwhelmed by this child who's doing this thing over again, when they felt powerless to address it, right? When they were dysregulated. So when a human is dysregulated, they do all kinds of things. And I would add that we don't have the good excuse that our frontal cortex is not developed. All of us, spend our whole lives trying to learn to manage ourselves, right? And with varying degrees of success. This is an 8-year-old. And he's an 8-year-old who's full of energy and needs a lot of guidance. So we're assuming this means he might not be quite where his peers are, even his 8-year-old peers, in terms of managing his emotions. And all I mean by managing emotions is noticing that you're dysregulated and ready to hit somebody, stopping, taking a breath, and shifting yourself as much as, moving away from, there are all kinds of ways to stop yourself from hitting somebody, but moving away from it, using your words instead, shifting, reminding yourself that it's not an emergency, reminding yourself you have backup and your parents in the next room and can be called, all kinds of ways to do that. He didn't do any of that, which leads me to believe he doesn't yet have that capacity, not because he's a bad kid, and he didn't shove her because he's a bad kid. He shoved her because he doesn't yet have the skills to, when he's dysregulated, to stop himself from lashing out that way. We need to strengthen the prefrontal cortex for him, and there are all kinds of ways to do that.
Huge. Okay, shall I read our next line?
Yes, please.
Okay, love it. Emma started crying loudly. I got so overwhelmed that I asked Dylan to go to another room so I could help Emma.
Okay, let's stop there.
Okay.
So I got so overwhelmed. Let's start with that. So we know that when our kids are dysregulated, it's easy for us to get dysregulated in response. We know that when anyone hurts one of our children, we are totally, it's like Mama Bear, Papa Lion comes out. We want to protect our child. So her child had just we assume she saw the shoving. How would she know it's a shove? But maybe they told her later about the shoving. Regardless, she knows her kid just got hurt. She's, of course, going to have to work on regulating in this moment. But when she says, I felt so overwhelmed, I got so overwhelmed, I asked him to go to another room so I could help Emma. It sounds like she didn't do terribly here. She could have raced in and screamed at him. She could have raced in and smacked him, right? There are all kinds of things that she apparently didn't do. Thank goodness. And how great for her. She was able to hold it, even though she was overwhelmed, she was able to hold it together enough that she didn't smack him. She didn't scream at him even. We don't presume she used a totally calm tone to say, please go to another room and let me help your sister. She probably didn't say it in that tone of voice. But she was able to regulate to some degree. And I want to give her credit because we've been sitting here second guessing her and saying she should have intervened earlier. Even, she'd been led to believe she shouldn't. But I just want to say it takes a lot to stay regulated in that moment. And she got overwhelmed, and that's totally understandable. So she did great to hold it together in that moment. And I really want to applaud that.
She really did. Yeah. Okay.
So she asked him to go to another room so she could help Emma.
Yes.
So let's think about the effect on the kids of what happened at this moment and why he needed to go to another room. So at this moment, sometimes your kids are at each other's throats and you do have to physically separate them before you can help the kid who's crying because the other kid is trying to still pummel them. We don't have a reason to think that's what's happening here or that they were shouting at each other. But maybe Emma was, you hurt me. And so she needed to have her son leave so she could help Emma calm down. But I don't think that the goal is actually to calm Emma down. She didn't say that. She said to help Emma. So, and I think that's great that she phrased it that way. And helping Emma at this point would be helping Emma feel safe again. That'd be the first thing. You want Emma to feel safe, like she's not about to get shoved again, right? And helping Emma feel seen and heard. Her body just got hurt. She got shoved and her heart just got hurt. She was told by her beloved older brother, because I think she does. Emma looks up to that brother, that he wished she was never born and he hates her. So her heart is hurting. So helping Emma at this point is going to be listening to Emma, hearing what she says, seeing her heart, her hurt heart and her hurt body, right? And acknowledging those things. Those are important. I don't think Dylan has to go to another room for that to happen. So I'm not sure why he had to go to another room. So it would just be a question. Maybe I don't have enough information here. But my hope at that point would be you come into the room, Emma's howling. Probably what I usually see is the 8-year-old by now would be like acting like he'd never seen Emma or you before in his life. That's usually what happens, right? Maybe even leave the room, but certainly maybe scooping up the magnetiles and putting them in his pocket. But he's not taking responsibility and trying to help Emma, probably because he's ashamed of himself. There's a lot of shame that usually kicks in when you see that you've hurt someone like this. And he knows he said this thing that was very hurtful to her. Again, I'm not sure why he had to leave, but let's say instead of what happened, you could do this. I was going to say you come flying into the room because that's the natural thing. But let me say it's overwhelming to go into the room and one kid is howling and the other kid has clearly hurt them. So you take some deep breaths and you talk yourself off the cliff. You remind yourself, they're only kids. They're having a hard time. Be okay. I can handle this. We're going to use this to learn from. He's not a bad kid because there's some part of her that's going, he's a bad kid. He did this bad thing to his sister, right? Because we're protective of the child who got hurt. So as you're talking yourself off the cliff, you're moving towards your kids. And maybe, the 6-year-old is howling. You scoop her up and you say, you scoop her to you and you say, ouch, Emma. Now, maybe she got shoved at this point. That hurt. Getting shoved hurt your body. Ouch. And those words could hurt your feelings too. Tell me about it, Emma. Tell me about it opens the possibility, like you're accepting all those feelings. They're not bad feelings. There's nothing wrong with her having these feelings. She's allowed to have the feelings. If she's going to heal from the feelings, she needs to know that someone's there, sees, hears, and allows, right? You don't need her stuffing them in her emotional backpack and then acting them out later. You certainly don't need to tell her she's not allowed to have the feelings and then have her try to have a stiff upper lip and inside be feeling all alone with her hurt. So if you said that to this child, to the 6-year-old, she would probably say, he hurt me. I was just, right? And she would tell you all the things that happened. Now, at this point, Dylan might leave the room. And if he left the room, that's okay. You're not taking care of him at this moment. You're taking care of the one who's howling. But remember, Dylan's in distress too. He is in distress. He's not a bad kid. He got overwhelmed. He lashed out. He's overcome right now with shame and remorse, almost certainly. And he's suffering. He hid out of his own suffering. By the way, his suffering was, my parents really don't love me anymore. They love this interloper more than they love me. I'm in danger of, not having my protectors in the world who I depend on and whose love and delight I depend on. I need to see myself in their eyes, see the delight in their eyes, just to feel like I'm a good person. And half the time I feel like a bad person. That's suffering. And he hit her out of that suffering. He shoved her out of that suffering, right? So we know he was suffering before he shoved her. And afterwards, it's only worse because he proved to himself he's a bad person, right? So he's suffering there. We're not saying to him, bad. We're also not that calm right now. So it's awfully hard to be nice to him. What I tell parents is, if at this moment, there's a way you can relate to Dylan to not push him away further, but to bring him back in, then do it. Like an example would be, Dylan, your sister's crying because it really hurts. You want to get the ice pack for her? Quick, Dylan, get the ice pack. That might help her. And then at least he's able to take one step toward redemption. And almost always kids are very hungry to do that. When they won't do it, when they're like, get your own ice pack, it's because you have so much work to do with them on healing the chip on the shoulder and recognizing the suffering, acknowledging their suffering. That once you do that, then they can find their way back and go get the ice pack. So they won't always be able to do it. Don't do it unless you feel like there's a possibility of that being good, because otherwise you're just making him feel like a worse person, right? So you're hugging Emma and Emma's saying, and she's like, he did it to me, he did it. And you're just acknowledging it really hurt you. It really hurt your feelings. Yes, and he hates me. Mommy, does he hate me? You're wondering if he actually hates you. I don't think he actually hates you. I think he got so mad at you, he said the worst thing he can say. But later, after we all calm down, we can talk about it, because I know it really hurts you to think he might hate you. Of course, he's your brother. So if you end up having this discussion in front of Dylan, nothing could be better for Dylan than to see the wound to his sister and the caring. Not, he might be a little jealous that she's getting all this caring, but hopefully you're giving him all this caring too. If you haven't been doing it so far, you're going to do it after this incident and on an ongoing basis into the future. So the point is that you don't need to send Dylan out of the room, which is what she did. So we could keep going with our.
It's a huge one. Huge, huge, huge.
Dylan stormed off.
Thank you. Little Emma took forever to calm down, and by the time I got to Dylan, he was even madder. He refused to apologize.
Okay. So it sounds to me like because she says he refused to apologize, we can imagine what happened is he stewed in the other room. And we all know, every single one of us has been in this position at some point in our life where something happens where we feel like we were unfairly treated. Frankly, those Magna-Tiles I should have been able to play with, they were not enough for me. She was hogging them. She wouldn't give me more. And then once again, I get blamed. She always gets whatever she wants, and then I'm the bad guy, and they never listen to me. They never care what I want. So notice there's no tears in my voice or my eyes right now. There have been earlier in our conversation when I exposed my suffering and vulnerability. Just now, I'm enraged, right? Because he was asked to go to his room. He stormed off. Or asked to go somewhere, to another room, she says. We don't know what room. He storms off, and he's been righteously revving the engine of his victimization. He's self-righteously reinforcing how everything's bad and everyone's bad to him and how unfairly he's treated. Okay, enter mom. Like, how would you feel if something had happened to you where clearly you've been unfairly treated, and then someone comes in and demands an apology? Wouldn't you give them a piece of your mind?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not feeling apologetic, 100%.
Exactly. So he refuses to apologize. Well, it depends on how you go into him. I mean, he's already pretty mad. But imagine there was another way to go into him. Imagine you started with a repair. Now, I can hear the parents saying, repair? What, I'm going to apologize? He's the one who hit my other kid. Understood. But a repair is a reconnection. A repair is not about who's right and wrong. A repair is a reconnection. So what if you went into Dylan and you said, oh, sweetheart, he's in here stewing. He's like, and you go in and you sit next to him on the bed. He might not let you touch him. I could see if you put your arm around him, but he'd shake you off, right? He's pretty mad. You take another breath and you remind yourself that he's not a bad kid. He's having a hard time and he needs your understanding, and he can't even self-regulate without your co-regulation, your calm nervous system. You need to calm yourself and listen to him before he's able to shift back into a regulated state. Connection precedes regulation. Connection is what allows co-regulation. Kids cannot self-regulate until they've had enough connection, co-regulation. And we do learn how to self-regulate. We learn it starting in babyhood when someone picks up the crying baby and holds us, right? But some kids are harder to soothe than others. And some of us learn this ability to self-regulate faster. And you could even say it's not really self-regulating. They're internalizing that parent. There's a neural network of that parent in their mind, in their brain, in their actual brain. There's a neural network associated with the soothing they felt, that good relief feeling of the parent holding them. And they associate it with their parent. And then when they're 8 and somebody shoves them on the playground, they can maybe calm themselves down using that neural network, right? But not everybody at 8 can do that yet, right? And especially if what dysregulated them was feeling they disappointed their parent. It's hard to use the parent in your mind as the co-regulator at that point. So mom comes in. She's got this totally dysregulated little guy, this 8-year-old. And he looks bigger than the little Emma, because she says, poor little Emma. He looks a lot bigger than Emma. But on the other hand, if you had a 10, 12, and 14-year-old, this 8-year-old would look like a little guy, which is what he is. So here he is. He's totally dysregulated. He's totally angry. Anger is a defense against the vulnerability. What's really happening is all that suffering of, I'm not good enough. I'm always letting my parents down. And I've disappointed my mother yet again. And I've hurt my little sister. Oh my goodness. All of that suffering and vulnerability, he's masking it with the rage, with the anger, right? And so she comes in, sits on the bed next to him, and it demands an apology. Not going to work. Let's just take the eraser and just erase that. She comes in, sits down on the bed, and she tries to repair. She offers a repair, which is a reconnection. She says, oh, Dylan, you really wanted the Magna-Tiles. You wanted more Magna-Tiles for your project, and there weren't enough, right? Now, every salesperson in the world knows that when you say right and the person says yes, then the next time you say right, they're going to say yes more, like every yes gets easier for them. And eventually they're signing on the dotted line to buy the car, right? That's how it works. So the first thing you start with is the thing that, of course, he's going to say yes to, which is you wanted more magnetiles and there weren't enough, right? Yeah, right. He's begrudgingly, and it looked like you felt she had plenty of magnetiles for her tower and you didn't. You needed more. Yeah, she always is hogging them. Now he's even opening up a little bit. He's showing you the suffering. It's an attack. She's hogging them as usual. But notice there's a little more vulnerability in his voice, right? And you continue. Sometimes it must feel like you have to share everything with your sister. The magnetiles, the dinner table conversation when you want to tell your story, even me at bedtime, right? You have to share your parents. That is so hard. So if he hears you say, now most parents have a really hard time saying this because they feel like it's a reflection on them. If I'm a good parent, my child wouldn't feel this way. Just take it from me. Every child has felt sometimes like you weren't there for them because you were there for the sibling. It just is going to happen. And the only way we can repair with our child is to acknowledge their experience. And it's okay. You're not a bad parent. They had this experience. And you're saying that must be so hard. I never intended for you to feel like I wasn't there for you. And the truth is, I am always there for you. No matter how much love your sibling gets, there's more than enough love for you. If we can say that to our kids, probably many times, they begin to believe that they matter to us despite the love they see their sibling getting, right?
So powerful.
And then that's the repair. That's the repair. And your child is not going to say, oh, Mom, thank you for coming and apologizing to me. They're not going to do it, right? But they feel it. They feel that you're acknowledging it. And in fact, you can even make a more overt apology, which is, I'm so sorry I wasn't there to help. It was such a tough situation for you and your sister to be in, and you didn't know what to do. And I'm so sorry I wasn't there to help. You're modeling, taking any responsibility you can because you want your kids to start taking responsibility themselves, right? And the only way they're going to do that is if you model that for them. And then we want to speak to the best in him because he's not. All of us make mistakes, and we're so much more than the mistakes we make. He made this mistake. He shoved his sister and he said a mean thing to her. We want to acknowledge the part of him that's bigger than that. We want to speak to that part of him. You must have been really upset to hurt your sister like that. You shoved her. And you know it's never okay to put your hands on her like that in anger. You must have been so upset. And you told her you wish she was never born. I know that sometimes you probably get so mad at her you do wish that. But you knew it was a hurtful thing. And you did it because you were so upset inside, right? We're acknowledging that we all get upset and we have the option of doing these things that later will probably make us sorry. And what an amazing lesson for an 8-year-old or even a 5-year-old to be getting from the parents, right? So maybe we should go back because I know we're going to run out of time here. So why don't you go ahead and go back to, I think we were about at the end, towards the end of this, right?
Dr. Markham, just a note there, when I can think of Dylan's experience in this, it's just so different to how we end, which I think is how many of us have told to work with our kids during challenging moments is you send them away, you take away something that they love, put them in a timeout. But it ends with, I told him if he couldn't be kind, he was going to bed. He called me stupid and our family stupid. He went to bed early, but I feel like a complete failure.
So we punish our children because we want to feel like we're doing something, right? That's the reason we do it. Do we think that sending this child to bed is going to help him feel more kindly, act more kindly? She said if he couldn't be kind, he was going to bed. I think she was equating if he couldn't apologize, then he couldn't go to bed. And, maybe he actually repeated his hateful, angry statements. That's entirely possible. Because if no one's listening, we have to raise our voice. No one was apparently listening to him if she came in and demanded an apology, which it sounds like is what she did, but we don't know for sure. But at that point, he probably felt not listened to, so he probably escalated. He was already angry, remember, and said more hateful things. And she said, if you can't be kind, then you need to go to bed early. So in other words, your angry and hurt feelings do not belong in our family. They certainly, you can take them to bed and go to sleep and numb yourself out if you want, but you are not going to be part of our family. Right? And that doesn't help kids deal with their feelings. And it certainly doesn't help the sibling relationship get any closer or help this boy feel any closer to his sister or any more warmly toward her or any more kindly toward her. But this mom was desperate at this point. She did everything she knew to do. She didn't have the tools that we're talking about here. And so she said, all right, go to bed. At least she didn't, hit him, smack him, scream at him. Those are all that, she was trying so hard to try to stay calm herself and to insist on standards of civility. And she's right. We need standards of civility. He's not allowed to talk to his sister that way, right? But we can't say that to him until he's been heard. Once he feels heard and seen, as we just described, the next part of the discussion might be something like he cries, he tells her how his sister always gets what she wants, how it's unfair, how she never listens to him. And she has to say, oh, honey, I'm so sorry you felt that way. I'm so sorry for anything I did that contributed to you feeling that way. You know that no matter how much I love your sibling, there's always love for you. You know I will never stop loving you. You know you'll always be my, if he likes to be baby, my little boy. All of those reconnecting kinds of things have to happen, and all of the reflecting back to him what his experiences has to happen. This is just step one of it. Probably it's going to happen over and over, once or twice a week for another couple of months. But he's going to work through all those feelings that he's had. But even tonight, after he's felt heard, he's going to sigh at some point and climb into her arms. And she's going to say, I love you no matter what. He's going to say, I know. And she's going to say, and your sister loves you no matter what. And he's going to say, I know. And she's going to say, it really hurt her body and her feelings when you shoved her and said that thing to her. He'll say, I know. And then she can say, I wonder how you can make that better with your sister. It doesn't have to be an apology. It can be whatever is going to work between the two of them. If the child offers an apology or a repair that seems minimal and not good enough, you can say to the other kid, does that make things better with you and your brother? And she might say, no, I don't think he even meant it. You can do that. But in the beginning, which is this very tender moment where she says, I wonder how you can make things better with your sister. He will be moved to make things better, but he'll still feel a lot of shame. And she can then alleviate that shame by saying, everyone has felt that kind of anger that you felt to your sister. Everyone has felt like saying something mean. Everyone has felt like shoving someone. You're not a bad person for feeling those things. And I'm going to keep working with you and supporting you so that more and more you can come and tell me when you feel these things. So you can always tell me when you feel those things, and I will always help you. You don't have to tell your sister. And in fact, you shouldn't tell your sister when you're that mad, those kinds of things, because it's so hurtful, right? Is it worth it? And he'll probably say, no. He'll say, yeah. So I wonder what you could do to make things better. Well, I could let her play with the Magnet-Tiles all day tomorrow, and I could read her a bedtime story. It's like bingo, right? Bingo. Could have totally avoided the going to bed early, the calling the family stupid. I mean, of course he called the family stupid. He's in a place where nobody's listening to him, right? And of course she felt like a complete failure because she was doing everything she thought she should do to try to protect her daughter. And yet she couldn't reach her son because she didn't have the tools.
Dr. Markham, what I just love about this approach is it holds Emma in such high regard. It holds Dylan in such high regard. And it's all about teaching. And I can feel little Dylan and Emma and Mom go, there is a different way to do this.
Yes, exactly. And we just like our child needs the skills to regulate in that moment, well, the parents, all of us as parents need the skills to regulate ourselves and because someone just tried to hurt our baby, right? To regulate ourselves and to shift ourselves back into a state of being the protective parent for both kids, remembering, okay, I don't have to go into fight or flight and see my son as the enemy. These are both my children. I'm their protective mom who's going to be nurturing and protecting and teaching both of them and really coaching both of them, which means listening more than it does saying anything.
So beautiful. Dr. Lara, thank you. I know we're over time. I feel like we could talk for another hour. There's so much here for this mom.
Yes.
Again, Dr. Lara's book, Peaceful Parents, Happy Siblings. It's fabulous. You can grab a copy and then As mentioned at the beginning, the website is fantastic too. We'll link it in the speaker notes below so you can just click right through. Dr. Markham, thank you. It's always such a treat whenever I get to speak to you.
It was really fun to do this with you. I loved it. And I want to send my love and hugs to that mom who wrote this and all the parents who are listening and trying to sort, how can I show up as the parent I want to be? This is the hardest work in the world. And I want to thank them for the privilege of being able to share these tools and support them as they grow.
Thank you, Dr. Markham.